다음은 참전용사분들에게 감사 메달을 수여하는 아주 특별한 순서입니다. 오늘 여러분 이 행사에 최첨단 메타버스 기술을 사용한다고 앞에서 소개해 드렸었습니다. 메타버스라는 것은 초월이라는 메타와 우주라는 유니버스의 합성어인데요. 현실 세계를 디지털로 복제하고 학습을 시켜서 가상으로 재생시킨 온라인 세상을 말합니다. 여기에 한국의 최첨단 AI 기술을 구현하여 참전용사분들 중 10분의 젊은 시절을 복원해내었습니다. 우리는 메타버스 세상에서 지금으로부터 71년 전 실제 참전했던 당시에 용사분들을 만나고 그때 그분들께 감사의 메달을 직접 수여할 것입니다. 오늘 메달은 소왕성 목사님과 김종대 장로님이 가성공원에서 직접 수여할 것입니다. 여러분, 오늘 첨단 기술과 결합된 이 뜻깊은 행사의 하이라이트를 영상으로 보시면서 참전 용사분들의 희생과 헌신을 더 감동적으로 기리는 그런 뜻깊은 시간이 되겠습니다. 참고로 오늘 이 영상 속에서 이제 사회를 보시는 분이 폴 커닝햄 씨인데 이분은 현재 거동이 불편하고 미국에 계십니다. 그런데 우리가 최첨단 인공지능 기술을 개설해서 이렇게 적용해서 그분을 사진을 복원해내고 또 메타버스 세상에서 건강한 모습으로 이렇게 사회를 보도록 모셨습니다. 여러분 기대를 가지고 한번 봐주시기 바랍니다.
저희 새에덴교회가 15년 동안 해왔던 참전용사 행사를 올해는 코로나 팬데믹으로 인해서 온라인으로 하게 되었습니다. 여러분 보고 싶습니다. 사랑합니다. 그리고 고맙습니다. 이 팬데믹이 끝날 때까지 우리 다시 만나는 그날까지 여러분 꼭 건강하게 살아계시기를 부탁드리고 기도하겠습니다.
Hello, I'm Staff Sergeant Paul H. Cunningham, and I served as a radar maintenance and repairman with the U.S. Air Force. We tracked and monitored all enemy and U.S. military aircraft in the air. Our radar could monitor aircraft up to 366 miles away. When I was in Korea, I remember walking through Seoul and seeing the devastation. I remember seeing a bombed-out church and the South Gate, Namdaemun, also damaged. I was so deeply saddened by people I saw who were suffering so much. Seeing South Korea today makes me feel our sacrifices were worthwhile. Now, I would like to introduce some of the men who served with me in Korea. Sergeant Thomas Kilfoyle. Sergeant Kilfoyle served in the U.S. Army in Korea from July 4th, 1950 to June 1951. In 24th Armored Reconnaissance Company, 24th Infantry Division, as a reconnaissance scout. He fought at First Battle of Osan, Kum River Battles, Battle of Daejeon, Nakdong River Battles, and Spring Offensive Battles of 1951. Sergeant Kilfoyle's job was to locate enemy positions and report them to tank and infantry units to engage in combat. He would drive a jeep to locate and report enemy positions. We didn't have any maps, so we drove around until we got shot at, and that is how we found the enemy, he remembered. Sergeant Kilfoyle fought in many battles, and in just 2 months, from July to September 1950, approximately 72 men in his company were killed, nearly half of the total number of men who had arrived with him in Korea in early July 1950. First Lieutenant Larry C. Kynard. First Lieutenant Kynard served in the U.S. Army in Korea from January 1952 to September 1952 in I Company, 3rd Battalion, 3rd Infantry Division as an artillery forward observer. He fought along the main line of resistance, Chorwan Valley, and the mountainous region of Imjin River, including Kelly Hill, Big and Little Nori, and Sugarloaf. Lieutenant Kynard also served as a forward observer with 1st Rock Division. And during the summer of 1952, his company defended against Chinese assaults to defensive positions across the Imjin River. Kynard's unit was assigned to attack hills across the river, 2 miles into enemy territory. Lieutenant Kynard described the rising sun that produced a dense fog which descended upon the valley and provided cover for his men. He said it was a gift from God that saved his company from annihilation. Private First Class Marthin Ben Hogan. PFC Hogan served in the U.S. Army in Korea from October 1950 to the end of 1951 in F Company, 21st Infantry Regiment, 24th Infantry Division as an infantryman. He fought at the Punch Bowl and Old Baldy. PFC Hogan sustained combat for 9 continuous months and suffered from frostbite and multiple injuries. The 21st Infantry Regiment saw some of the toughest combat in the Korean War, and by the time PFC Hogan left the war, the 24th Infantry Division had sustained over 10,000 casualties. As a member of the 21st Infantry Regiment, he received the Presidential Unit Citation for extraordinary heroism in combat. Sergeant J. Fumio Hidano. Sergeant Hidano served in the U.S. Army in Korea from August 1950 to November 24, 1950, in E Company, 2nd Battalion, 8th U.S. Cavalry Regiment, 1st Cavalry Division, as a rifleman. He fought at the Nakong River battles, all the way from Nakdong River beyond Pyongyang, North Korea, and was seriously injured during the Battle of Unsan. Sergeant Hidano, a Japanese American living in Hawaii, enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1946. He was serving in Japan when the Korean War broke out. Sergeant Hidano was put in charge of 75 South Korean soldiers because he was highly trained and he was able to use his Japanese language skills to communicate with the South Korean soldiers. As their platoon leader, Sergeant Hidano fought side by side with his ROK soldiers. Sergeant Theodore Tex Malcolm. Sergeant Malcolm served in the United States Marine Corps in Korea from November 1950 to November 1951 in Baker Company, 1st Battalion, 7th Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division, as a rifleman and communications lineman. He fought at Wonju and Chorwon. Sergeant Malcolm spent his 21st birthday, December 12, 1950, in Korea. Sergeant Malcolm volunteered to fire a 3.5 rocket and soon found himself fighting at Wonju and Chorwon against large numbers of enemy forces. Malcolm and his fellow Marines fought from hill to hill, holding off continual large assaults by the Chinese. At one point, Malcolm and the Marines of Baker Company were nearly out of ammunition, but held off the enemy until daybreak, when they were finally relieved. I was cold. It was so cold, he remembered. First Lieutenant Gene Richards. Lieutenant Richards served in the U.S. Army in Korea from October 1952 to July 1953 in Charlie Battery, 57th Field Artillery Battalion, 7th Infantry Division, as an artillery observer, flying behind enemy lines to direct artillery fire. He fought at Pork Chop Hill in 2 campaigns. Lieutenant Richards arrived in Pusan on October 18, 1952. Serving first as a ground observer, he saw many of his buddies killed by mortar fire. Lieutenant Richards was later assigned to an area 7 miles south of Pork Chop Hill, where he flew missions from a dirt airstrip. Lieutenant Richards flew 219 dangerous missions behind enemy lines. He flew sitting behind the pilot of a small L-19 plane with a 2-man team. His duty was to observe and adjust artillery fire to support infantry troops. For his bravery, First Lieutenant Gene Richards received the Air Medal and 4 oak leaf clusters. Sergeant Lou Bradley. Sergeant Bradley served in the U.S. Marine Corps in Korea from May 1952 to November 1953. He was in 1st Marine Air Wing as a rescue crew chief. He was stationed at Pyeongtaek Air Base. Sergeant Bradley was responsible for rescuing pilots who were shot down by the enemy. Many times he jumped out of his helicopter and ran through bullets and into freezing water to rescue American pilots. He had little safety gear, and when he jumped into the freezing water, he had no floating vest and only 2 ropes to hoist the downed pilot into rescue helicopters. If Bradley had stayed in the freezing water a few minutes longer, he would not have survived. Bradley volunteered to extend his service in Korea for a longer period because he wanted to serve until the end of the war. Sonar Man, 3rd Class, Roy Wagner. SO3 Wagner served in the U.S. Navy in Korea from August 1951 to April 1953 aboard the USS Halsey Powell. SO3 Wagner operated and maintained sonar equipment, which was used to search for enemy submarines and mines. If a mine was detected, it was destroyed by firing rifles at the enemy target. The USS Halsey Powell was frequently fired at with artillery rounds from North Korean Communist forces. His ship also bombarded the east coast of North Korea at Wonsan, Hungnam, and other North Korean military targets, and also served as a guard for U.S. Navy aircraft carriers. Mr. Wagner has good memories of Christmas 1952, when a group of U.S. Army combat soldiers celebrated Christmas with him on board USS Halsey Powell. Corporal Marvin Dunn. Corporal Dunn served in the United States Marine Corps in Korea from July 1951 to July 1952. He was in Able Company, 1st Battalion, 1st Marine Regiment, 1st Marine Division, as a heavy mortarman. He fought at the Punch Bowl during 2 separate campaigns at Hill 749 and Hill 884. During the fighting at the Punch Bowl, the men of Able Company were building bunkers when Corporal Dunn screamed to his men to take cover from incoming mortar fire. As he ran to warn his buddies, he was struck by shrapnel and severely wounded. Corporal Dunn's warning saved the lives of others, but his heroic actions resulted in the loss of his left leg and one eye. To the people of Korea, I am proud to have served during the Korean War and to have done my part in protecting the freedom of Korea. Seeing South Korea today makes me feel that the sacrifices made during the Korean War were worthwhile. May God bless the Republic of Korea and the United States of America. We will always remember your noble sacrifices. Thank you.